Next on Newsmax Prime, Kevin calls it quits. Majority Leader McCarthy withdraws from the race for Speaker, and that has a lot of folks talking, including us. Then, is it all downhill now for Hillary? Ed Klein just wrote the book Unlikable, and Mrs. Clinton will not like what he has to say. Plus, confessions of a former leadership candidate. That would be your humble host. Find out what happens when politicians who run every 2 years find themselves voting for or against their peers. Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, McCarthy steps aside. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy withdraws from the race for Speaker, and the House Republican Conference postpones its leadership vote. Miranda Kahn has more from our Newsmax Prime newsroom. Miranda?
J.D. McCarthy acknowledged that his remarks about Benghazi had factored into his decision, but today he told his fellow Republicans that it just wasn't his time. As surprise members left the conference, there was a sense of uncertainty with no clear path forward and no set date for a new vote. Here's what Kevin McCarthy told the media after making his decision.
I'll stay on as Majority Leader, but the one thing I found in talking to everybody, if we are going to unite and be strong, we need a new face to help do that. So nothing more than that. I feel good about the decision.
Conservative stalwart Richard Biggery joined us last night, and he warned House Republicans of a backlash if they had voted for McCarthy. He went on to express just how frustrated conservatives are with recent leadership.
I think the Republican conservatives are going to play hardball here, and they're going to have to remember that we're focused on America here. We've got primaries coming up here soon, and as I say, it's primaries stupid. And if you vote for McCarthy as in the House, you're likely to be primaried. I think you can expect a primary battle if you vote for McCarthy. Conservatives, as I said, J.D., are white hot with anger. You see it out in Trump's vote, in Ben Carson, Carla Farino, Cruz's vote. People are furious and they want changes, and we don't want this business as usual mentality that the Republicans have been practicing for so long.
Now with the election postponed, the race is on to see who becomes the new frontrunner. Will it be Jason Chaffetz, Daniel Webster, or will yet another candidate emerge? Tonight, most House Republicans are probably asking that very question. J.D., back to you.
Thanks, Miranda. For more on this major story, let's bring in political analyst Dick Morris. Dick, of course, also the co-author of the best-selling book Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. Dick, let's talk about the one party with a leadership vacancy, the Republican Party on Capitol Hill. Kevin McCarthy withdraws from the Speaker's race at a most interesting time. What's behind his decision to pull out?
Well, first of all, let me correct you, J.D. There's not one party that lacks a Speaker, but two. The conservative Republican Party and the mainstream Republican Party. And they're becoming increasingly defined groups. The conservatives having somewhere between 40 and 80 votes and the rest being part of the establishment. Now, McCarthy pulled out, I think, probably because of the flack he's taking from Hillary because of that stupid comment he made when he was asked what was the accomplishment of the Benghazi Committee. And he said, well, Hillary certainly is taking criticism, and a lot of people are not believing her. Her poll numbers are down. And that was twisted by Hillary to mean the purpose of the investigation was to lower her poll numbers, and this was a mission accomplished George Bush moment. But I think the other problem is that it's clear that he cannot unify the Republican Party. It's clear that he lacks the credentials on the right side to be able to do that. I think Jason Chaffetz can do both. I think he is Mr. Inside and Mr. Outside. On the one hand, he's a certified conservative and a member of that group. On the other hand, he served as chairman of the Government Reform and Oversight Committee very, very effectively and got that position by a vote of the caucus.
Of course, we also have a situation where Daniel Webster of Florida, the former Speaker of the Florida State House, stepped in, and the Liberty Caucus, the 40-plus conservatives to whom you alluded earlier, yesterday in conference said they were going to go with Dan Webster. So does Webster weather this and emerge stronger in the race for Speaker?
Well, Webster, disclaimer, he's a former client. I think the race could boil down to the devil versus Daniel Webster. But I think that,
well, you're not saying Jason is the devil, are you?
No,
okay.
I was saying McCarthy was, but, I couldn't resist the metaphor. I think that Webster's a very good guy with a tremendously articulate and a strong conservative supporter. I think the leadership now has to get its act together. It has to figure out who can replace McCarthy. Scalise, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Right, Steve Scalise, currently the whip.
The whip. He's right behind McCarthy, and he's a conservative. He was put in that position to try to broaden the appeal of the House leadership. You need somebody of that ilk to serve, if not as Speaker, then as Majority Leader with an establishment Speaker. But the point is, when the Speaker's problem is, when he went into these negotiations with the Democrats, and he came out and he said, this is the best I can get, the conservatives didn't trust him. And as a result, they were saying, we're not going to vote for any deal. We're going to vote a pure position. And then the choice was shut down the government or do nothing. And Boehner was constantly impaled on the horns of that dilemma. And it seems to me that if you got a conservative majority leader, that is from one wing of the party, and a speaker from the other, or the other way around, and
well, it's probably going to be the other way around, Dick, because it looks like McCarthy stays the leader as a consolation prize. That's what Darrell Issa, not using the term consolation prize, but saying McCarthy will remain majority leader. So wouldn't Scalise stay as whip, and might the conference turn to a senior member of the House who has both conservative cred and establishment bona fides?
Well, they might. You need to figure out who that would be, because for the most part, senior members stay senior members and stay in committee chairmanships and stuff because they appease and play ball with the Speaker. I think that you have to assume that all bets are off at this point, and see what the leadership does and see what the conservatives do. The ultimate fear here, JD, is not, as you know well because you're in the House, is not that the conservatives will win a majority of the caucus. They won't. But that they will have enough votes so that the caucus that votes for the establishment no longer has a majority on the floor of the House. So the Democrats vote for Pelosi, the establishment Republicans vote for Mr. X, the conservative Republicans vote for Webster, and no one has a majority.
We'll keep our eye on that, Dick. I would be remiss in the minute that remains to not turn our attention to Hillary and her efforts to further diminish the Select Committee on Benghazi. Do you expect the Democrats to follow her lead, to release more private closed-door testimony and try to blow up the process before she has to appear before that committee?
Oh, I think if they can, they will. But I don't think they can. I think that the public really understands now that Benghazi is a serious issue. It warrants investigation. They're looking forward to the hearing with Hillary. And I think Hillary's kidding herself when she says that she can just stonewall this and say this is just a partisan attempt to lower my poll numbers. It's her latest theory, and her spokesmen are hewing to it, but it's ludicrous.
You, of course, have written in a column, there is trouble ahead for Hillary. Will that come in the form of a criminal investigation, or has she just reached her political expiration date? 15 seconds.
Well, I think both, but I think it will be a criminal investigation. Whether she ultimately is indicted or not is kind of a prosecutor's judgment call, and might have more to do with whether Biden gets into the race or not. If the Democrats have an alternative, they're more likely to let her be indicted.
Fair enough. We should note for the record that later in this broadcast, we'll have more on Hillary with Ed Klein and Betsy McCoy. For now, Dick Morris, we thank you for your time. Again, Dick, the co-author of the best-selling book, Power Grab, Obama's Dangerous Plan for a One-Party Nation. Now let's bring in our panel. Joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C., former Pennsylvania Congressman Bob Walker. And joining me here on the anchor desk, the former Chief of Staff to Congressman Walter B. Jones, Jr. of North Carolina, Glenn Downs. Glenn, it was 6 days ago. You said Kevin McCarthy might get out of this thing. Today it happened. Why?
Well, good question. But 6 days ago, when we were talking about it here, we had some indications from Capitol Hill that there were serious doubts about McCarthy's candidacy from some people that were high up in the Republican ranks. And so you started to see some cracks then, and they obviously manifested themselves in sort of a catastrophic way for his candidacy today.
Let's turn to Bob Walker, and for purposes of full disclosure, not to replay unpleasant memories, but Bob, both you and I at different times ran for the leadership and finished second. How surprising was this? All the mainstream guys are saying this was a huge surprise. Was it, in fact, a surprise?
It wasn't a terrific surprise. I mean, I don't think anybody expected this. I was on the Hill this morning, and everybody up there assumed that Kevin was going to get the votes that he needed to be the nominee. And the question was whether or not the Freedom Caucus would then take the candidate that they had voted for in the caucus, in the conference, and go to the floor with that, but would vote for McCarthy once he got on the floor.
So obviously, the Freedom Caucus, Glenn, had some leverage right there. They stuck with Dan Webster of Florida last night, and that carried some weight today with McCarthy.
Well, Mr. McCarthy was not going to get to 218 votes today in the conference, which led to the question whether he could do it on the House floor later in the month. And I think part of his calculation was, for a lot of different reasons, no.
And, of course, in terms of a Leadership Preservation Act, Kevin says, well, I stay as majority leader, and that creates a kind of traffic jam of unfulfilled aspirations. Dr. Tom Price was running for majority leader, as was the current whip, Steve Scalise. And while there is no shortage of talent and ambition, it sets up a traffic jam and some interesting dynamics. Tell you what, Bob Walker in Washington, Glenn Downs right here, you stay right here, and you stay right here too. We will continue the conversation, all the permutations, all the possibilities, all the intrigue next.